Let's start again. Welcome. This is round two. You will hear it on the audio earlier. Welcome to Documents and Drafts, the podcast where we look at historical important documents that are especially important to the United States. We drink some cool beer along the way and all that fun kind of stuff. We'll do some other cool stuff. So we're going to look at the Federalist and Anti-Federalist Papers. I'm going to drink some local beer today, and we'll go from there. So, and hopefully I don't screw it up because I've been screwing it up. So here we go. So the first thing we're going to do is we're not even going to do, we'll go back to that in a minute. We're going to read the Federalist Papers. I'm sorry that I've done all this already, so I'm kind of doing it a second time. My apologies. Okay, we get to read it again. This is from the American Battlefield Trust, battlefields.org. Here we go. The Federalist Papers are a collection of 85 essays and articles that were written by supporters of the ratification of the Constitution in the fall of 1787 and the spring of 1788. The intent of the essay was to sway public opinion, particularly in New York, towards supporting ratification of the new proposed Constitution, all written anonymously under the pen name Publius. The papers are still instrumental in understanding the basis of the new system of federal government that was proposed. The Federal Convention in Philadelphia adjourned on September 17, 1787. Quickly, those in support of the proposed Constitution began to campaign across the state to garner public support. Each state was to hold ratification convention to join the new federal government. The larger states, such as New York and Virginia, were skeptical of the centralization of government authority, and it became clear that an active editorial might be necessary to convince public opinion to support ratification. Three men took the lead on this campaign: Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. Hamilton was a Revolutionary War veteran and current member of the New York State Legislature. James Madison, a Virginia politician, had been instrumental in the sessions of the Federal Convention. John Jay served as a New York jurist and had been a diplomat representing the United States and Spain during the Revolutionary War. As the lead author, Hamilton authored 51 of the essays, with Madison authoring 29 and Jay contributing 5. The three men wrote and placed articles in various New York publications. Though the articles were quickly shared to other states wanting to keep their identity anonymous, Hamilton chose the pen name Publius. Many historians believe that Hamilton chose Publius to honor the Roman philosopher Publius Valerius Publicola. The Roman Publius played a significant role in helping establish the Roman Republic. The three men writing under this pen name also played a significant role in establishing the new American Republic. The Federalist Papers were first published in New York newspapers. They were numbered in order of publication and usually referred to by those numbers. The essays targeted New York's ratification debate, as the state was seen as pivotal due to its size and influence. Later, the articles were compiled and printed in 2 volumes. The Federalist Papers laid out some of the basic tenets of the new Federalist government and the creation of the Republic. These included the need for a strong union. Federalist numbers 1 through 14 argued that the Union's survival depends on a strong central government to address issues such as defense, commerce, and interstate relations. Federalists 39 and 51 lay out the basic principles of federalism with the separation of powers and necessary checks and balances designed to prevent totalitarianism. National leaders on both sides of the debate were aware of possible sectionalism. Federalist number 10, written by Madison, addressed the problem of factions and how a large republic can mitigate their effects by diluting their influence. Other controversial portions were focused on the branches of government and their authority. Federalist 70 defended the need for a single executive to ensure accountability and effective governance. Federalist number 78 explains the judiciary's role and the importance of judicial review. Hamilton went on the attack by critiquing the current framework of government under the Articles of Confederation. Hamilton pointed out of the many flaws, focusing on their inability to provide for the common defense or maintain public order. The states must give up some of their sovereignty and self-rule for the greater good of the whole. Also, Hamilton took on the accusations of the secrecy of the Philadelphia Convention, arguing that to allow the delegates the ability to discuss and debate the tenets of the future republic without fear of public reproach. The Federalist Papers played a crucial role in shaping a debate over the Constitution. Although they were primarily intended to influence New York's ratification convention, their arguments resonated broadly. The Constitution was eventually ratified in 1788, with New York narrowly approving it. The essay's immediately impact on public opinion is often debated. The Federalist Papers were not universally read at the time, and many anti-Federalists remain unconvinced. However, they provided a systematic defense of the Constitution that has endured over time. In the early 19th century, the Federalist Papers gained prominence as the authoritative interpretation of the Constitution. Supreme Court Justice John Marshall cited them in the landmark cases like Marbury v. Madison and McCulloch v. Maryland. Today, the essays are frequently referenced in constitutional law and political theory. The Federalist Papers remain essential in reading for anyone studying the Constitution or American political philosophy. They provide insights into the framers' intentions and the challenges of balancing government power with individual liberty. Some scholars, however, critique their elitist tone and tendency to downplay democratic participation, reflecting the framers' skepticism of direct democracy. Framers were right. Despite these criticisms, Federalist Papers are celebrated as a masterful articulation of Republican government principles. Their enduring relevance lies in their exploration of timeless issues, including the balance between state and federal authority, the dangers of factionalism, and the need for institutional safeguards against tyranny. The Federalist Papers were a strategic response to defining moments in American history. They offered a compelling vision of a unified republic capable of addressing the challenges of governance while safeguarding liberty. Over 2 centuries later, they continue to inform debates about the U.S. Constitution, demonstrating the foresight and intellectual rigor of their authors. So that is a synopsis of the Federalist Papers from the American Battlefield Trust, which is battlefields.org. So let's check where we are there. Okay, 7.5 minutes. Good, I like that. Okay, so that is the Federalist Papers. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about what we are drinking. There it is. There's the About Us. We are drinking Wybridge St. Denis Red. It's very good. Their most famous is something called Blood Orange. They also have an IPA called Why Not. They have a double IPA called DIPA called Why Not, I think. They are really into dessert beers. So anyway, here's a little background. You can find them on whybridgebrewing.com. Brewmaster Ray Ballard. Ray Ballard is the current head of Honcho. Ray became interested in brewing when he first tried Sam Adams in the early 90s. His enjoyment of beers with more flavor led him to pursue home brewing, where he fell in love with the process and the freedom to create beers that are as unique or as similar to others that he liked. After starting with premix kits, Ray elevated his home brewing game to all-grain brewing, which afforded him greater control in his craft. After winning many medals in his homebrew competitions, Ray co-founded his first commercial brewery in Connecticut. After 3 years, Ray returned to Ohio, became a nurse, and did that for 10 years. But during his nursing tenure, he never lost interest in brewing and knew he would eventually make his return to the beer business. Wybridge Brewing is his triumphant return to the craft beer industry. So they have a 20-barrel system, 5-barrel fermenters, 40-barrel bright tank, 2-barrel specialty. They're open on Friday and Saturday. Trying to see what they have on tap right now. So you can see he really likes dessert beer, Boo Boo Strawberry Shortcake Blonde Ale, Y City Wheat, which is the Blood Orange, Why Not Blonde, Downtown Brown, which is my favorite, Blood Orange Wheat, the Red Line, Raspberry Milkshake Blonde, Ohio Smash IPA, High Bridge THC infused water. Oh, that's new. I didn't know that. Cherry Stout called Jerry at the Y. It actually kind of tastes like Dr. Pepper. St. Denis IMF Red, which is what I'm drinking. They make their own seltzer water, Ray's Hazy IPA. Fresh Baked Brew, which is the St. Denis Red with, makes it taste like French toast. Parker's Haze, a DIPA. Little Susie, an unflavored hard seltzer. The Payback Porter is also really good. Okay, so that is Wybridge Brewing. So we'll drink that as we go. So again, let's check where we are. Okay, 10 minutes in. All right. So, hope you're enjoying today. Now we're going to talk about the Anti-Federalist Papers from the Free Speech Center. No, there we go. From the National Constitution Center, constitutioncenter.org. So let's take a look at that and have a little beer before we go. All right, here we go. Let's see. The form of government is most Americans know that the Federalist Papers, I'm not reading them. Plus American. Here we go. Most Americans know the Federalist Papers and the collection of essays written by Hamilton, Jay, and Madison in defense of the Constitution. Fewer know the Anti-Federalist Papers authored by Cato and other incognito writers, their significance to the American political history, and their responsibility for producing the Bill of Rights. When the Constitution was drafted in the summer of 1787, its ratification was far from certain. It still needed to be ratified by at least 9 of the 13 state legislatures. The failure of the Articles of Confederation made it clear that Americans needed a new form of government. Yet there was worry that the Constitution gave too much power to the federal government. The original draft of the Constitution did not have a Bill of Rights, declare all states' laws subservient to federal ones, and created what they thought was a king-like office in the presidency. At the Philadelphia Convention and in the Federalist Papers, Madison argued against having a Bill of Rights, fearing they would limit the people's rights. Opposition to the Constitution after the Philadelphia Convention began with Elbridge Gerry, Edmund Rudolph, and George Mason, the 3 dissenters who refused to sign the document. Then it grew to include Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, and Richard Henry Lee, heroes of the Revolutionary War who objected to the Constitution's consolidation of power. In time, the various opponents of the new Constitution came to be known as the Anti-Federalists. Their collection of speeches, essays, and pamphlets later became known as the Anti-Federalist Papers. While each of the Anti-Federalists had their own view of what the new Constitution for the United States should look like, they generally agreed on a few things. First, they believed that the new Constitution consolidated too much powers in the hands of Congress at the expense of the states. Second, they believed that the unitary president eerily resembled a monarch, and that resemblance would eventually produce courts of intrigue in the nation's capital. Third, they believed that the liberties of the people were best protected when power resided in state governments as opposed to a federal one. Lastly, they believed that without a Bill of Rights, the federal government would become tyrannous. These arguments created a powerful current against adopting the Constitution in each of the states. The state legislatures across the country, opponents of the Constitution, railed against extensive powers it granted the federal government and its detraction from Republican governments of antiquity. In Virginia, Patrick Henry, author of the famous Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech, called the proposed Constitution a revolution as radical as that which separated us from Great Britain. In the essays of Brutus, an anonymous author worried that without any limitation, the proposed Constitution would make the state governments dependent on the will of the general government for their existence. The Anti-Federalists mobilized against the Constitution in state legislatures across the country. Anti-Federalists in Massachusetts, Virginia, and New York, 3 crucial states, made ratification of the Constitution contingent on a Bill of Rights. In Massachusetts, arguments between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists erupted in a physical brawl between Elbridge Gerry and Francis Dana. Sensing the Anti-Federalist sentiment would sink ratification efforts, Madison reluctantly agreed to draft a list of rights that the new federal government could not encroach. The Bill of Rights is a list of 10 constitutional amendments that secured the basic rights and privileges of American citizens. They were fashioned after the English Bill of Rights and George Mason's Virginia Declaration of Rights. They included the rights of free speech, speedy trial, due process, protections against cruel and unusual punishment. To accommodate the Anti-Federalist concerns of excessive federal power, the Bill of Rights also reserves any power not given to the federal government to the states. Since its adoption, the Bill of Rights has become the most important part of the Constitution for most Americans. In Supreme Court cases, the amendments are debated more frequently than the articles. They have been cited to protect the free speech of civil rights activists, protect Americans from unlawful government, surveillance, and grant citizens Miranda rights during arrest. It's impossible to know what our republic would look like today without the persistence of the Anti-Federalists over 200 years ago. Now, that is from constitutioncenter.org. The music today is from Soundstripe. Let's get it going again here if we can. There we go. All right. So I'm going to read one more thing about the Anti-Federalists. This is actually from the antifederalist.org. So we read all about it, but they broke it down like this. These were the incognito writers. Agrippa warned that making federal laws paramount over state constitutions would render state declarations of rights meaningless, strip citizens of common law protections, and concentrate authority so heavily at the center that the local governments and individual liberties would vanish without an explicit Bill of Rights. Brutus cautioned that vesting broad judicial power in distant federal courts would absorb state judiciaries, eliminate jury trials, and brand any state challenge to overreach as treason, effectively muzzling resistance and paving the way for unchecked national despotism. Cato criticized the Senate's sweeping authorities, altering money bills, originating appropriations, appointing ambassadors and judges, making treaties, and trying impeachments, combined with lifelong tenure and constant session, as destroying any balance of power and enabling systematic usurpation of both state rights and individual freedoms. Centennial argued that the new federal judiciary was designed to dwarf state courts, making justice as costly, intricate, and unattainable for ordinary citizens as it was in England, thereby empowering the wealthy to oppress and ultimately ruin the poor. John DeWitt protested that under the General Welfare Clause, Congress could grant trade monopolies, create new crimes, impose severe punishments, and extend its reach at will, leaving state legislatures powerless to protect their reserve powers and citizens vulnerable to arbitrary federal legislation. The federal farmer condemned the lack of a constitutional council for the president and the creation of a vice president solely to preside over the Senate, warning that these defects would blur the lines between executive and legislative branches and concentrate appointment powers in an unaccountable few. George Mason was a key anti-federalist delegate from Virginia who refused to sign the Constitution, arguing it lacked sufficient protections for individual rights that granted excessive power to the federal government. Impartial Examiner warned that the Constitution's Supremacy Clause would obliterate state sovereignty by making federal law supreme over all state constitutions and laws, while the absence of explicit rights protections will leave citizens defenseless against federal tyranny. Luther Martin decried the Constitution's silence on press liberty, civil jury trials, and standing army limits, objected to barring ex post facto relief only for those laws, and warned that postponing any ban on the slave trade would weaken the national defense and perpetuate moral and political peril. Maryland Farmer warned that the proposed Constitution would create a consolidated national government that would devour state sovereignty and subject citizens to tyrannical rule by a distant aristocratic elite. An old Whig argued that the proposed House of Representatives offered only a shadow of true representation. Legislators unfamiliar with local needs would craft law without proper information or accountability, eroding public confidence and allowing distant power to override the people's will. Philadelphus, argued that the proposed Constitution was a conspiracy by wealthy elites to establish an aristocracy and aristocratic tyranny. The new federal government would destroy Republican principles and enslave the American people under the rule of a corrupt upper class. So that is from antifederalist.org. Pretty interesting. So far today, we have read the Federalist Papers. We've talked about the Federalist Papers. We've talked about why Bridge Brewing and drinking the St. Denis Red. It's pretty good. We have talked about the Anti-Federalist Papers, which I think are kind of interesting. Today we're just only going to look at historic. Where'd it go? at the historical, um, where'd it go? Oh, this thing. Sort of this. Why won't it? Well, you get to look at my face until I can figure this out. Share screen. There it is right there. Share. It goes back to me. Hmm. Why won't it go there? I don't know why it won't go there. It still won't go where I want it to go. So let's see if I can do it another way. So we'll make me smaller. And there it is. That's what I want. So we're going to talk about, sorry for the confusion there. And if you're listening to the audio version, I really apologize. We're going to look at Bradwell versus the state. So here are this is 1873. The facts of the case. Myra Bradwell asserted her right to practice law in Illinois by virtue of her status as a U.S. citizen. The judges of the Illinois Supreme Court denied her application with only one judge dissenting. So the question is the right to obtain a license to practice law guaranteed by the 14th Amendment to all citizens of the United States? The conclusion, now this conclusion will be different today, but in 1873, the conclusion was no. While the court agreed that all citizens enjoy certain privileges and immunities which individual states cannot take away, it did not agree that the right to practice law in a state's courts is one of them. There was no agreement, argued Justice Miller, that the right depended on citizenship. In his concurrence, Justice Bradley went above and beyond the constitutional explanation of the case to describe the reasons why it was natural and proper for women to be excluded from legal profession. He cited the importance of maintaining the respective spheres of man and woman, with women performing the duties of motherhood and wife in accordance with the laws of the Creator. Okay, so that has been overturned, obviously, but that was Bradwell versus the state, 1873. The next one is Brown v. Houston. So let's take a look at that. This is from, by the way, these are from oyez.org, oyez.org. So this is April 3rd, 1884. The Louisiana law assessed an annual tax on goods which remained stored on flat boats prior to sale. Brown, a representative of Pennsylvania Coal Mining Company, refused to pay the tax on a load of coal which had been shipped to an agent in New Orleans. So the constitutional question is, did the Louisiana law violate the Constitution by posing an improper restriction on interstate commerce? The conclusion, no. The court found that the Louisiana law did not violate the Constitution. Justice Bradley reasoned that since the law imposed a tax upon merchandise, which had already arrived at its destination, merchandise which was effectively a commodity in the market of New Orleans was not offensive to the Commerce Clause. It was not a regulation on goods which were in a state of transit. Furthermore, the law did not discriminate against foreign producers because it applied to all goods within the state, not exempting products which had been made locally. Okay, again, so that's from oyez.org, and that is Brown v. Houston. We're going to do one more. This is Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad versus Chicago. All right, this is March 1st, 1897. Facts of the case. The city of Chicago wanted to connect two disjointed sections of Rockwell Street between 18th and 19th Street over private property. Property was owned by various individuals, but included a right-of-way owned by the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad Corporation. To accomplish this, the city petitioned in Cook County Circuit Court to have necessary land condemned. The land was condemned. The individual was awarded compensation while the railroad was awarded just $1. The railroad appealed the judgment, alleging that the condemnation deprived of its property in violation of the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. The Supreme Court of Illinois affirmed the judgment. So the constitutional question, did Chicago's condemnation of the and compensation for Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroads land violate the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment? No. In a 7-1 decision, the court held that the Due Process Clause required the states to award just compensation when taking private property for public use. While the court warned of the danger of a government that did not have any restraints in exercising eminent domain, fair compensation could address that danger, since the procedures specified in Illinois general statutes were followed in this case. The railroad's 14th Amendment rights were not violated. This case marks the first time that the court incorporated a specific provision of the Bill of Rights, the just compensation requirement of the Fifth Amendment, through the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, and applied that requirement to the states. This approach set the stage for further incorporation of the Bill of Rights. So again, the historical cases, we're not going to do new cases today. The historical cases came from oia.org. All right, so we're going to wrap today up. So again, personal reflection. And this is anybody. So if you decide you want to read the Federalist Papers, you need to make sure you read the Anti-Federalist Papers. You want to get both sides of the same story. So if you're a youngin and you're listening to this, or you're thinking about taking a political science class, and they cover the Federalist Papers, but they don't cover the Anti-Federalist Papers, that's showing a bias. So make sure you get both sides. If you're going to get a master's degree, I have a suggestion, or a PhD. I'm too old, but my PhD dissertation would be, the Anti-Federalists were right, and they're 250 years too late. Again, so welcome. Thanks for listening to Riley's Documents and Drafts. Today we did the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers. Normally we do these two books. We didn't do those today. We did the Federalist Papers. The Alan Dershowitz book, which is I have, is really good. The Anti-Federalist Papers, I need to get this. I don't have it, so I kind of have to find them. So that's on my bucket list to buy. We drank some local Wybridge brewing, St. Denis Red. It's really good. We did 3 Supreme Court cases. Bradwell versus the state, about whether or not a woman could practice law in 1877. Brown v. Houston, and Chicago versus Chicago, basically about eminent domain. So next time, what is next time? The next time we get together, we are going to probably talk about John Dickinson's observation on the Constitution, and maybe George Washington, and maybe Patrick Henry. I appreciate you listening today. You can find us. The music's provided by Soundstripe. You can find us on Spreaker.com, Spotify, iHeart, Podcast Addict, and YouTube under Documents and Drafts. So check us out, and I hope you have enjoyed today, and have a great day as I try to figure out how to get us out of here. And we will talk to everybody very soon. Screen sharing is stopped, so that helps. And take care. Pause that. I'm going to take care and have a great night.